Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, automotive enthusiast friends from literally around the globe this time. It's that time again. Time for another
Mumteza episode of V8 Radio, Kevin.
I'm sorry. What?
Mumteza. That is an Arabic word foreshadowing, meaning awesome.
Wow. Well, it is Mumteza then. Fantastic.
And any of our Saudi Arabian friends listening, if I butchered that, I profusely apologize.
Yeah, you just offended the entire country.
Yeah.
All right, well, having said that, I'm your host, Kevin Oeste, joined as always by our esteemed co-host, Mr. Mike Q-Ball Clarke, on another episode of V8 Radio that is just completely Mumteza.
Right on.
And for those of you who tune into this show every time it comes out, you're well aware that we like to start these off with an automotive trivia question before we get into our deep-seated topics and stirring conversation about all things automotive. Did you happen to whip up a trivia question this time, Mr. Mike?
Well, this time, yes, I happened to whip one up, Kevin, and I'll unleash it.
Whip it out.
Yeah, yes. I wasn't going to say that, but okay.
It'll be Mumteza.
All right, Kev. All right, Kevin. General Motors has made some pretty powerful cars over the years. But Kevin, I ask you, what is the most powerful factory stock engine that General Motors has released to the general public?
Okay, great. Well, the fact that you said engine
yes.
leads me to believe it is still an internally combusted gasoline type engine and not an electric
I'll give you that.
motor. So
not electric motor, internal combustion engine.
Good.
With pistons and everything.
So would that be the current LT5, making somewhere in the range of 730, in that range, somewhere around there? That's my guess. There could be something else out there, but I'm battling a little bit of a cold, so that's what comes out.
Okay. Well, you asked if it could be. Well, we will find out if it could be, and if it is, at the end of the show.
Okay, well, that'd be
So that's your final guess, the LT5 making about 730 horsepower.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm statistically challenged today, so that's what I'm going to go for.
Okay, cool.
All right, I've got one for you. In 1973, 80% of all motorhomes produced in the United States shared one thing in common. And what was it?
That you suck, that's what. Oh, man. In 1973,
yeah,
all motorhomes in America shared the same thing.
80%.
All right, 85% shared the same thing.
I think it was 80% of all motorhomes shared one thing in common. What was it?
That they were rear-wheel drive.
That they were rear-wheel drive.
Because you did have that GMC motorhome that was based on a Tornado drivetrain that was front-wheel drive.
This is true.
And maybe it's a stretch, but I'm guessing that makes up the other remainder.
You could very well be true.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say rear. I'm going to note this down. This is your final answer, right?
Yeah, my final answer.
All right. Okay. Duly noted.
Nice. All right.
Well done. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we have for today's show.
So, Kevin, you just got back from a really big trip in a really exciting show. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Well, that's the thing. I'm still backwards on my clock, I think.
Right.
I don't know if I'm jet lagged or just what the true definition of that is, but
Maybe just exhausted.
Exhausted is another possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So Kelle and I just got back from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and the Global Auto Salon show, and it was really, really unbelievable. I will open with everything that they had told us about Saudi Arabia and the Middle East in general was wrong.
Really?
Really. You and I had kind of, discussed this show in advance, in the past couple weeks and months.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some concerns, right? Because
Sure.
I've never been there. You were there in the military a couple decades ago. And apparently things are changing so rapidly in the region. For one, that a lot of the customs are starting to open up a little bit. So, for example, they gave women the right to drive. I guess it's been over a year now, a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But a lot of people have told us, you got to be careful for safety concerns, and that men can't look women in the eye when they talk to them, and don't expect Kelle to be shaking men's hands and doing business and whatnot, and all of that was out the window.
Wow, that's amazing.
It really was. It was almost just like being here, except for the differences in the way the Saudi culture carries themselves. And what I mean by that is we didn't have any, I think there was, over the course of the whole week, 10 days we were there, maybe 6 or 7 of the older gentlemen didn't shake her hand, but everybody else did.
Okay.
And the population is insanely young. I mean, somebody said the statistic was like 80% of the population is less than 35 years old.
Wow.
And judging by what we saw, that seems to be true. It was unusual to see, some of the older gentlemen, and very unusual to see the older women walking around. Now, granted, this was a car show, so it drew out, possibly a younger crowd. But the people were just so nice, and never once did we have any feeling of being unsafe or being nervous or anything like that. Now, we also recognize that we kind of lived in a bubble because we took a really nice flight over there, and we stayed in a 5-star hotel. And it was also a very high-end automotive event, with exotic cars and Ferraris and Paganis and all that stuff. But even so, the general public was there, and we left the hotel and ventured into Riyadh a little bit to the embassy and also to an Air Force base, and met some people along the way. And the population was just so gracious. Over and over again, they thanked us for being there. They thanked us for having that event. They thanked us for having the interest in the region and helping them grow the automotive market, which was one of the main goals of the show. So we were really, really amazed at just how inaccurate the information was that we had gotten ahead of time about what to expect.
Oh boy. Well, I apologize for the part I played in that. I mean, obviously I only had what my experience was 30 years ago when I was in Saudi Arabia. So
right, and that, I think it was good, because it was always better to be cautious,
Sure.
than to be lax. But I just think a lot of that stuff has just changed so much that it doesn't really apply today. And the familiarity. So we were concerned about a language barrier. Everybody there spoke English. There was a few instances, like for example, at this show, there was many different components of entertainment. So they had an auction, they had a salon where cars were for sale, they had some attractions like the giant Hot Wheels loop.
Speaking of the giant Hot Wheels loop,
Yeah.
was that functional?
Yes.
Because I did not see one car go on it. I saw no video of that.
There is video out there, and I'll share it.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah. They didn't think the schedule was a little bit loose on this stuff. So I think they did it a couple of times a day at the height of the crowds.
Okay.
But yes, in fact, I watched the video again today. I think it's a British guy that does that.
Okay.
Kelle met the driver, and that's a whole thing in itself, doing the live Hot Wheels loop. But there was a Formula One demonstration. It's a 500-meter track that they would buzz up and down and chase each other. There was a Monster Jam deal with monster trucks. There was drifting. There was a Hoonigan set up with even more drifting and smoke shows. So there was all these different types of entertainment outside, and then in the tents, which were building structures. They had a couple, I guess 250 or so different vendors and manufacturers from the U.S. that came out. So you had like Automotive was there, and some of the wheel companies, and Magnaflow, and all the big brands that we know and love here.
Right.
So the purpose of the show was not only to entertain people with all of the displays, but also to help establish a bigger footprint for automotive enthusiasts and products and business to expand in that area. And we didn't know what these people were expecting from us, because Automotive, we know them as a company that makes high performance fuel systems for drag cars and stuff here. Is that going to translate to over there? We just didn't know. And it turns out that the Saudi population are a bunch of people that really dig cars and knew Automotive. And in fact, there's a brand of Nissan truck called the Nissan Patrol, which is sold there and not here. I think it's it's kind of like a Nissan Pathfinder. But those guys are modifying those things like crazy out there. They're putting LS motors in them with superchargers and turbos and stuff.
Righteous.
Yeah, and they needed fuel system upgrades. So Automotive previously had a couple of dealers kind of set up, but they developed a product line for that truck. And when they went out at this event that we were just at, they were taking orders like crazy to sell these things. Nice. So the market is there totally. It's not as sophisticated as here because you don't have mass retailers like your Summit Racing and Jags and stuff like that.
Right.
Technically, you got to kind of buy stuff in containers and have it brought over, which
I see.
Can be kind of challenging. Their distribution networks are very different. So it kind of cumbersome. It's a person who owns a small shop who tries to make a deal with somebody else to bring this stuff in.
Okay.
So that was another aspect, is trying to build the sophistication into their distribution system for retail sales of parts and stuff. So it was far more than a car show and far more than the Hot Wheels loop. There was a lot of so my function over there was I was hired by Bonnie Air, which put on a big part of the event, to host some roundtables on stage with people from here, from the U.S., but also individuals from Saudi Arabia who are in the car world over there, and have cross communication about what they need and how things work, and to try and find ways to have American companies satisfy the needs and open up that market. So we learned a ton. In addition, our friend Salam, who owns the blue ZR9 Camaro that we built a few years ago,
Right.
He brought that car in from Dubai and had it on display in our booth for our shop.
How's it looking?
It's looking awesome.
Yeah.
The car's been done for 3 years now, and it looks like the day we sent it. I mean,
Is that right?
It looks perfect, yeah.
That's sweet.
And I think he's put 2,500 miles on it or something like that. He hasn't driven it a whole lot, but he's driven it. And he's driven it hard. I mean, it's been over 167 miles an hour, so that was cool to see that. But the car was a traffic stopper. You know, people were coming by and just pointing at the car. And it's funny because a lot of them knew what it was. A lot of people just think a muscle car is a Mustang or a Camaro. You know, they didn't really know what it was. But we also had a strong response of people that wanted to potentially hire us to build one for them. So that was pretty cool too. So going into this thing with kind of wide open expectations was great, because by the end of the trip, I came home realizing how little I know about the world. That's what it all boils down to.
I believe it. I mean, it really sounds like it's becoming the birth of a whole new automotive movement out there, and the desire was there, but now they're going to be able to figure out the infrastructure and how to get those mega box stores like a Summit or a Jegs to maybe expand out there and really feed this to where it really, from its infancy to really being something that's really prime time out there.
Well, I guess that would be the ultimate goal. They have a long way to go, because there's cultural differences that are challenging. They don't really have much in the way of tech schools and trade schools. So much of their information comes from watching YouTube videos of how to do modifications to the cars. And you know as well as I that information's there, but is it accurate?
Yeah, I mean, maybe half the time.
Yeah,
if you're lucky.
Right. It's entertaining, but there's no standards there. So that's a challenge. The other things that we've learned is that they've got a lot of regulations that they're fighting the same way we are here. But theirs are kind of different. For example, you can't change the color of a car in Saudi because it's an identifier for that vehicle. They look at it as almost an extension of the VIN. So it's illegal to paint a car a different color.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know this.
Yeah, nobody did, until we got there. Yeah. And even if you put stickers on a car, you can get in trouble. They're fighting that. Right now, technically, it is illegal to drive a classic car on the road.
Is that so?
Yeah. So if we had shipped over, and that's a whole nother topic. I begin to start saying if we shipped over a car, the people in Saudi Arabia have, old cars and classic cars were sold there new in the 60s and 50s.
Okay.
And they can't drive those legally on the road.
Really?
Because of, I never really got to the bottom of why. I don't know if it's a safety thing or if it's a registration thing or whatnot.
An end of life thing. They decide that it's no longer a viable unit.
Yeah, but what we did learn is that the fine isn't very high, so a lot of people drive them anyway, and they just say, we don't care. Right?
It's kind of illegal, but it's not really enforced, that kind of thing.
Right.
Okay.
And we also learned that many people are educated, secondary education here in the U.S. So I can't tell you how many people we met that were Saudi nationals. They were born there, and they went to UCLA, or they went to John Marshall, or they went to Harvard, or they went to any number of United States universities. And that was pretty wild to share stories with these people that were common, U.S. stories, not expecting them to have that knowledge, but they were here for 4 years or for 7 years or whatever. and for many of them, the kingdom paid for them to come over and get that education, in hopes that they would take that knowledge back to the kingdom and enhance their society. But if they chose to stay here, it's not like they had to pay that money back. The kingdom was okay with them staying. I guess, assuming that eventually they'll come back.
Okay.
So we had met a guy. We went to a Cars and Coffee thing, and I shared that video online about the Cars and Coffee, and it was exactly like being at a Cars and Coffee in Southern California or anywhere. Several hundred cars. They ran everywhere from 60s muscle cars to late model Corvettes and of course European and Japanese and trucks and all kinds of stuff. And this one dude in particular rolled up in a 68 Buick LeSabre.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, cool, an old Buick. So I walked over and I was talking to him, and he had bought that car in St. Louis, not far from our shop, when he was going to school at St. Louis University.
Huh.
And he really liked it, so he shipped it back home for him. And I was talking to him, and I said, so what's under the hood? And it was originally a Buick 430 car, and he blew up the Buick motor, and he couldn't get parts. So now it had a small block Chevy under the hood that he had bought out of a truck in a junkyard and installed it. But it was kind of a bummer because the whole engine was covered in oil. And it had open vacuum ports, and it was missing hardware out of the alternator bracket and everything. And I said, okay, so, what's going on here? I said, how does this thing run? And he's like, oh, yeah, it runs really good. And he starts it up, and it idles okay. But his vacuum ports that were open were ported. So I said,
okay.
Rev it up. And he goes to rev the thing up, and the throttle blade's open, and it exposed these vacuum ports, and it stumbles, And I said, okay, well, here's your problem. I said, do you see these ports that are open? And the guy's like, oh, yeah. And I said, put your thumb over that. So he puts his thumb over it, and we rev it up again, and it runs a lot smoother. And I said, what you're doing is you're sucking air in without fuel through that port, and it's making it run lean and popping. Oh, so should I plug? I said, yeah, you should make a plug. And he's like, oh, thank you. We just don't know. We need help. So I said, let me take a few pictures of your engine, and I will look at this thing on the plane going home and see if I can offer some suggestions on how to make this thing run better. I think he had a bad PCV valve or something, and it was spitting oil out all over the place. And so he had all the desire, but didn't have the knowledge to keep this thing going.
It's funny you say that, because I think this seems to still have held true back from when I was in Saudi Arabia, and probably for years before then. The Saudis don't really do anything themselves. They outsource almost all of their labor. So they just don't have that educational basis to know about these things. Right. And that, what you just said there just really rings true to that.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing to learn, because the longer there, the more we picked up on that very concept, that the Saudi culture, so everybody was super gracious. They were super nice, very welcoming. Very warm, nice people. But you're right. In the hotel, in the morning, we would have a buffet-style breakfast in the hotel. Not like any buffet I'd ever been to. They had different areas for different regions of the world. So they had like an Asian buffet, and then they had American-style food, and they had traditional Arabic, and then they had like Brazilian, and anything you wanted was there. But we gathered that all the staffers were Indonesian and Lebanese laborers that came over. And the people that were building the event, putting the tents up and doing the legwork, were a lot of people from North Africa and different countries. We met some individuals there that turned out to be some pretty good friends of ours. these people, three gentlemen, are part of a car club that kind of spans the whole region, and they each one of them had their own museum, ranging from 20 cars up to 80 cars, and they were displaying at this event because they are also very involved with trying to grow the industry and build all this up. So they're heavily invested in cars and in the culture and everything. And it was funny. The one guy went to school at UCLA and hung out in Southern California and has been to like SoCal Speed Shop and all that stuff,
Dig it.
He was a hot rodder, But talking with him and the other two guys, the one guy, again, he had like 60 cars in his museum, but the person who worked on the cars was a non-English speaking guy from Turkey. So he had this Turkish mechanic that came down and spun the wrenches. So
nice.
Yeah. And that guy was super, super nice. During the event, he was pouring us tea the whole time and Saudi Arabian coffee and handing out cookies and stuff. And
oh, cool. Very nice.
He didn't speak a word of English, and it was a little bit tricky to communicate with him, except for we had a phone app that we could type and translate.
Okay, cool.
And you could use like Google Translate or whatever.
Right.
So our customer and friend Grady, who he came with us, and Grady and the Turkish guy really bonded, and they were
is that right?
Passing love letters to each other, basically about how much.
I don't have a lot of trouble believing that.
Yeah, it was funny. Well, the Turkish guy eventually typed out to Grady that he loved him with all his heart. And he was being
Grady's
sincere.
Got a nice pen pal.
Yeah, exactly. So that was pretty wild, to learn that, like you're saying, and again, it's part of that culture because they don't have the trade schools, and so newer cars get serviced at dealers, and if you have a supercar, if you're lucky enough to have a Ferrari or something, you might ship that out of the country to have it worked on, maybe
goodness.
to the United Arab Emirates. To Dubai or even back to Europe. And we also learned that some of those people will buy a new one and they'll drive it basically until the first maintenance period comes up, at 2 years or a year or something, and maybe trade it for a new one, and just avoid that whole thing. So
that is something else.
Yeah,
that really is.
But it brings me to the next aspect of this event, which was the auction, and the big misconceptions that we had about as I was referring to it, the financial enthusiasm for classic cars that everybody expected. So the stereotype is that the Saudis are all dripping in oil money and they've all got unlimited resources. And it turns out that that's not really the case. Not to say they don't have the resources, but they're not foolish with their money. They don't spend willy-nilly. And interestingly, part of this event was the salon, which was an entire building full of cars for sale, and the cars all had a descriptive sheet on the windshield with details and then a price, right? And then you had the auction, which the cars did not have any prices on them. It was just up to the auctioneer to start the bids,
to drive it up. Yeah.
Get it going. Well, when the auction finally rolled around, none of the cars, I think 3 or 4 cars sold in the auction, and that's it.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Right. And there was hundreds of cars that went through the auction. So immediately everybody's panicking, what's going on here? And unfortunately, a lot of the feedback from the States was very negative about the Saudis and, just making up stuff about what was going on. But what we believe, having been there, is that when the Saudis saw some of the prices on the salon cars, they started to have a few questions. And the reason for it is because the cars if you were to send over a car from the States, which most of them came from here, what you were told is that, okay, at this event, the kingdom is paying for the cars to get shipped over and be there, but the kingdom is going to put a $30,000 premium on each car as a way to try and recoup some of their investment and putting this event on.
Okay.
So they wanted a high caliber of car, not only to demonstrate a high quality level of cars, but they wanted cars that the $30,000 really wouldn't affect, that much.
Okay.
Right. So if you send a $500,000 car,
yeah,
$30,000 really doesn't matter that much.
Right. Exactly.
But not all the cars were in that range, and in addition to that, the auction had a premium, I think a 10% grease on the auction as well. So now you're at, potentially, $40,000-$50,000 of taxes and fees added to the price of the car. Not only that, but because
there's
we had
more.
But wait, there's a lot more. Because Americans didn't understand the culture, and we were told for years in the media and in movies and general stereotypes that these people are made of money. So they were told to price the cars at whatever you want, because they got it.
They'll buy them.
They'll buy it. So the salon cars, one example was a Gullwing Mercedes that, my guess the street value was probably $1.5 million or so, and it was listed for like $3 million.
Oh.
And these guys were inspecting and checking the cars out, and they're like, why is that so expensive?
Okay.
And they would pull their phone out, and they would look at eBay, and they would look at the Haggerty pricing tools, and they would look at Mecum and Barrett-Jackson, and they're like, this car's way overpriced. They have all those resources.
Wow.
And pretty soon they were starting to say that it looks like the Americans have come here to take advantage of us.
Oh, ouch.
Right, which wasn't good. So the way that they reacted to that was by not buying anything at the auction, because they just automatically assumed that everything was way overpriced, and they were correct,
Oh boy.
So they were making a statement that said, we're not, and one guy came to our booth afterwards and was talking to Grady, and he was saying that, some of you Americans think that, we wipe our rear ends with $100 bills. And,
well, don't you?
Right. And that is clearly not the case.
Right.
So that sent a ripple throughout the industry, because it wasn't immediately obvious as to why this auction was tanking, and speculation was flying, And there was one other negative aspect, and that is that some of the cars got damaged in shipping from the U.S. over there, right? Ring Brothers, for example, had a Mustang that got beat up badly. It was loose in the container, and it smashed into another car, and, a lot of bad stuff happened. And when they unpacked the car, the bumper falls off, and it was bad. And the Saudis immediately got a bad rap. The event got a bad rap, saying, you guys don't know how to manage the cars or whatever. But again, a little research determined that it got narrowed down to essentially one shipper and one shift in the U.S. that failed to strap them down properly before they got sent across the ocean. So it really had nothing to do with the Saudis. It was on American soil. But the perception, again, not understanding, cast a negative spin on everything right away, which was a letdown, because that's not really what happened. There was one other example where you might have seen the car. Denny Terzic and Pro Rides a couple years ago built a '55 Chevy called Xbox, and it's an LS turbo car. It's black with a blue insert Stufsky did the design work on it.
Hmm.
Every panel's been touched, 3D print work. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Cool.
And that car got sent over for the. It was definitely in the salon, possibly the auction, and that car journeyed across the United States, across the ocean. I think it landed in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia. Then it was trucked down to Riyadh in a container, and then it came out of the container. And the minute it hit the ground, it was very dusty from being in the container.
Sure.
And somebody took a picture of it right away and posted it online saying, these are these same people that drive Ferraris and abandon them on the side of the road and let them to be covered in dust and don't take care of anything. And it caused a big wave again of people becoming outraged at what they were seeing. And the reality is, I don't know, half an hour after that picture was taken, that car was spotless because there was a team on site that was doing a steam clean process that was blowing them off, steaming them off, and then polishing them. And some of the other Americans also volunteered to help buff and polish that car and make it look perfect again. But that picture didn't get shared.
Of course not.
It was only the one where it was covered in dust.
Yeah.
So
sounds like somebody was trying to create their own narrative of things.
Well, I just think it's because there was a misunderstanding, and I fully admit a month ago, I didn't know what to expect.
Sure.
I'd never been there, and one of the things that's really easy to do, having been there, is look at the differences as opposed to the similarities. And one example is the Arabic language, right? When you write the Arabic language, to us, it looks like a bunch of squiggles.
Right.
You cannot look at an Arabic phrase and make out what it says unless you've been trained in Arabic.
Right.
Their language, spoken language, sounds nothing like English. Spanish, you can, if somebody says, ¿Dónde está el automóvil?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, where's the car? I can kind of get
¿Dónde
that.
está el biblioteca?
Right. Yeah. Where's the library? But in Arabic, there's no words to sound out that are even remotely close to anything in English.
Right.
It's just a totally different language. So there's two differences. The next one is the clothing, right? The Arab, the Saudis, the women are shown in the media wearing the hijab, which is the black cover from head to toe, with the little slit for the eyes, or an abaya, which is a headscarf, and that looks very different to what we're used to, and it makes us nervous. We don't know what it is. The only time you ever see that stuff is in a movie where something bad's about to happen, right? I mean, for real, that's what you see.
Yeah.
And the men, many of them wear what's called a tobe, which is a robe from head to toe, and the headscarf, with the ringer on the top and the red houndstooth plaid looking, head cover. And nobody really knows what that's all about here. Is it a religious thing? Is it political? Why do they do this? We don't know. Well, when we went over there, we learned that women are not forced to wear the cover-ups. They wear them by choice.
Really?
Yes. And the degree of that which you cover up is determined by several factors, right? So some of them choose to cover up when they get married because they are preserving themselves for their husband's eyes only, right?
Okay.
So there's one. Another one is that the Muslim religion really promotes the concept of humility and being humble in the eyes of Allah, right? So they cover up because the more covered you are, the less of an individual you are in public, and the more humble you are before their God, which is like the opposite of the entitled, I'm an individual, selfie, social construct that we have here, where everybody's special and unique, right? So it's just 180. But we've learned that Some of the more pious women will cover up as much as they want because of the religious beliefs. And then there's kind of the medium ground where they wear the headscarf and their face is visible. But many had no covering whatsoever with regard to the scarves or anything else. They dressed like an average American person, maybe not quite as revealing of clothing. Most of them had long sleeve shirts on and like a dress pants kind of thing. So it wasn't as liberal of a dress as you have here, but there's nothing that's forcing them to wear that stuff. And the men in their robes, the tobe, they do that as fashion. That's just a style thing. We learned that the guys in the white ones, that comes from working outside in the sunlight, and it's cooler because it's white and it's kind of loose. Granted, it goes up to the neck and it goes to long sleeve, but they're very comfortable and they're easy to wear. And the headscarf keeps them out of the sun, and the way they wear it, if they let it flow, it's kind of to keep the sunlight off them. If they start to get warm, they tuck it up over their ears and form it a little bit differently. And if they're cold, they might wrap it around the front of their face. So it's utilitarian. It's got function.
Sure.
And once I learned that, and once I learned that the women weren't there to be intimidating, they were just there because their beliefs, all of a sudden I was very much at ease with seeing these different wardrobes, because they were kind of neat looking. The guys were wearing different colors, so the white ones were how I was describing, but if it was a gray robe or a brown or a dark blue, that kind of signified maybe a little higher social status. Maybe they were an executive and they worked in an office. And Grady and I were talking about how we thought it might be cool to try one of these things on, just because they look neat after a while. And one of the gentlemen we met actually sat me down and he put the headdress on and showed me how it's styled and everything. And I said, am I being offensive to you by wearing this? Because I'm an American. And he said, no. We're happy that you're taking an interest in Saudi culture.
Good.
And we're honored that you would be willing to try this on and share in our brotherhood. So again,
good.
all the stuff that I thought I knew was backwards.
Yeah, I'm learning quite a bit from what I used to know and believe about that culture. That's pretty interesting stuff. I'm glad you asked him if it was when you were trying on the headpiece, if it was offensive or not. So that shows deference, and probably he respected that from you. So. Well,
yeah, cool. I didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, look at me, everybody! Yeah.
Right. And so we tried to be good ambassadors for our country and the U.S. and not cause problems. So we were always wearing long sleeves and dressing conservatively. And while I was doing the stage work and interviews, I had a jacket on and the whole thing. But that doesn't mean a lot of our counterparts, they were wearing the same stuff they would wear to the SEMA show. So, short sleeve shirts with logos all over them and baseball caps and, just regular car show stuff. And everybody was fine with that. There was no judgment, no problem. So it was really an eye-opening experience. I think, like I said, they've got a long way to go to kind of build that infrastructure up and to generate the kind of business that they want to do, but they definitely want to do it.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I certainly think they can do it, and it certainly seems that they're on their way to do it, especially by putting on this large of a show, of an event, that is. And I hope that with all of the hiccups that occurred with either miscommunication or not understanding either from us not understanding their culture or they're not understanding ours. I hope that those things are able to be ironed out for the next time that this happens, so things will kind of change a little bit and go much more smoothly and be even more successful than this one.
I hope so, and I really hope it happens again. We're kind of waiting to hear if they're going to do it again. There was another aspect of this event that was really, really special, and that is that the timing, right? So typically in the U.S., a car show starts at 8 in the morning, goes to 5 or whatever. SEMA hours are 9 a.m. to 5.
Right.
Well, this one, it didn't start till like 2 in the afternoon, and we left at midnight every night, and there were still people there until 2 or 3 in the morning. And part of the reason that we were told is that their culture shifts everything later because it's so hot during the day in the summertime.
Okay.
But I just think they're a nighttime based society. That's when they do their recreational stuff is at night. So we would get there at 8:30 or 9 in the morning, and it gave us a chance to walk the show and see the cars and everything, and in our case get the stage crew set up and the lights and all that stuff and cameras, because we took all that down every night, and get things going. But it was really wild to see these people start to trickle in at 2 and 3 and 4. But in that morning day period, it gave us Americans that came there a chance to bond more with each other.
Good.
So spent a lot of time with Chip Foose and Carson Lev, who does a lot of Chip's representation and event planning and whatnot. In fact, Chip got bored and came over and was teaching Grady and Kelle how to draw.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That was neat.
And the Kindig guys were right across from us, and the guys from Classic Car Studio were right down the hallway from us, and some of the other companies, the Ring Brothers, Mike Ring and his wife and kids all came out, and we just had a lot of time to spend with them, which normally we only get passing in the hallway at an event somewhere else, just to say hi. So It was a nice way for us to go 8,000 miles away and hang out, with people that...
Be able to have a conversation with somebody.
Right, it seems silly, but that's what happened. So that was all really cool too.
Well, I hope you gave Chip my best. I'm sure he was
I did.
Worried.
He asked about your gangrenous hand. But I'll tell you one thing one thing that he did that was super cool is he had a couple sketching sessions on our stage where he taught some of the locals how to draw, and the locals were
nice.
6 or 8 female art teachers and 10 or 12 female art students that were, anywhere from probably 2nd or 3rd or 4th grade level. There was one little boy, I think, in all of the 2 sessions. All were women, and they were dressed in the. Some had the hijab with just the eyes, revealed, and some had headscarves. And here's Chip Foose teaching him how to draw, a 32 Ford.
Wow.
It
what
was
an experience, man.
Mind-bending, and we don't think that has ever happened before,
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah, right. And they just loved it. And some of them, you could tell they were kind of batting their eyes at old Chip, too. I think they liked him a lot.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So... that was unexpected, how neat that was. And then Kelle, who was very concerned initially with her personal safety, and, she had heard stories about some woman showed an ankle and got stoned in the street, or, some kind of whatever. And I'm not saying that stuff never happened in the past, but on this trip didn't have anything even close to like that happening. And in fact, Kelle hosted a roundtable discussion of women in motorsports on the stage with the lights and a PA system, and it was her, a woman named Deb Farrington, who is a firefighter and paramedic by day and an autocross racer in the Optima series on the weekends. And
Amazing.
Then she had Kendra Summers, who's an online video producer. She had a woman named Eva Castellane, who is the Middle East marketing rep for Motul Oil, the racing and off-road oil company. And then she had AJ from Overhauling on her panel. And then she had the NHRA Top Fuel drag racer Erica Enders on her panel.
Oh, wow.
And they were all talking about what it's like to be a woman in motorsports, but they're all on stage in Saudi Arabia wearing American clothes, and it was. I think that was kind of unprecedented, also. And it was
talk about busting through a glass ceiling. That really shows it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
It was really, really wild. So again, I'm still trying to figure out what even happened. Just to have so many expectations and have them all change, and then to let in the fact that this event was just awesome on so many levels. The cars they had were phenomenal. The exotics that came out from other countries that were part of some of the other events there were unbelievable. The auction didn't go as planned, but the people that we talked to that clued us in on why it didn't go well also said, but next year, it won't be priced that way and it'll be different.
We learned lessons, and that's all you can do. You're never going to know how something is going to turn out until you do it.
Right.
So you just had to do it to find out where the pitfalls were, and then you can fill those in, and it'll be smooth for next time. So,
Yep.
I mean, as long as you learn from it, it's not a failure. It was just a hiccup, and it was a learning point.
Totally. And especially because the financial investment was absorbed by their country, so it's not like, somebody was out 20 grand shipping a car back and forth.
Right.
And even though those cars didn't sell, I think the knowledge exchange that happened, the crowds that were drawn in, because there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people that came to this thing, it generated the buzz about the industry that I think the kingdom wanted to do. And the Crown Prince came to visit one day and was there.
Oh, cool.
I believe the king himself was there.
Oh boy.
The brother of the I was saying the word king, but apparently it's not right. I guess the premier of Dubai, he was there. So a lot of royalty and heads of state from around the region came to see the event, which was really, really far out. And I personally had some really wonderful opportunities to do some interviews on the stage. So I did a panel discussion with American car customizers. So it was Chip Foose, Dave Kindig, Jimmy Shine. And then Miles Kovacs. And Miles is the guy who started Dub Magazine. And, and all of the brands that are associated with that. Miles is a great guy. All those guys are really, really tremendous.
Especially Chip.
Oh, yeah, right. Lefty, as you call him.
Right.
And then, there was a lot of really notable people that came out. So I had time on stage with Tony Schumacher, the Top Fuel drag racer. And Tony and I went to the same high school, but didn't know each other until many years later.
No kidding.
Yeah. And then I had time with Cruz Pedregon, another NHRA Top Fueler. And then guys like Iron Man Ivan Stewart, legendary off-road racer.
The Iron Man, when I saw that picture, that was so cool. Yeah. Who doesn't love the Iron Man? He's awesome.
He is awesome. And it was a great conversation. And we talked all about, what it takes to be a champion. And he is in every sense of the word, in sport and in life. And there's just so much to learn from that guy. And then, chatted with a bunch of manufacturers and other media people and again, more notables. A lot of artists were out there. So our buddy Ed Tilrock was out there.
Tilrock, yeah.
Max Grundy and Alex Carmona. And, it was kind of a bummer that we had to go to the other side of the world to hang out like that. But it was great.
But look at it this way: you got to go to the other side of the world and hang out together.
We did, yeah, we did, and the food was wonderful the whole time, and they built this whole structure in a matter of months, and pulled it off. So to the Bonnie Air crowd. And Peter McGillivray and Jonathan Moore, who run that division, I still can't believe that it even happened. The amount of sheer labor it took to do all this was mind-bending.
Yeah.
And SEMA had sent a representative out there. She is a business development, international business development person for SEMA to help connect people to businesses. And personally, I think SEMA should have had a little bit more of a presence because these companies in the Middle East need SEMA's services to grow and expand the market share. So we'll see if they get more involved in the future.
Cool.
It was the real deal, man. It was something else.
Yeah, man. I tell you, I remember when you and I were talking when you first heard that Peter wanted you to be involved in this, and you were telling me all about it. I'm like, and how massive it's going to be. I just could not wrap my mind around all the logistics and how that was going to get pulled off. But it got pulled off.
Yep.
And there's some pretty smart people working that show to do it. So, hats off to them, man.
Yeah, and they're still there. They anticipated being there for a month solid after the event in teardown.
Okay.
And they're making sure that so all those cars are coming back to the States, and they're making sure that they're all strapped down properly. And Joe Subergandio, my old buddy who I do a lot of the work with at the SEMA show, he was an operations guy over there, so he's leading a team that is strapping cars down and handling all that.
Perfect.
Yeah, so you'll know it's getting done right.
Good,
because they got the right people on it. But yeah,
nice,
it was really an amazing experience.
I hope you get to do it again. I hope it goes on again, and I'm sure you'll get tapped to do it again if it.
Well, we'll see. I mean, but I was talking with Jonathan Moore from Bonnie Air, and I said, what's crazy is a year ago, nobody in attendance that came from the U.S. was thinking that, where we need to be next year? What I think the next hot market is for my suspension parts? I think we need to be in Saudi Arabia.
Arabia.
Nobody thought that. And largely because nobody knew what was going on over there, and the opportunity didn't exist. But I learned that Saudi is the 5th largest market for American cars in the world.
Really?
Yeah. So
Jeez.
So that was, and we learned that at the embassy. So the U.S. Embassy hosted a dinner and gave a speech about the economics of the region when it comes to the automotive sector. And what's popular and what's not, and what they do to try and help facilitate all that. So that was really cool. And then our trip to the air base was interesting. It was a U.S. Air Force base that its sole function today is to train the Saudis who are purchasing their own aircraft and teaching them how to maintain them, how to fly them, but also to train them so that they know what they're buying. Because in many ways, they put an order in for X number of aircraft, and they need an expert to certify that that's truly what they got.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because they're not familiar with it. And then to provide an advisory role of training their people on how to do the basic maintenance and do repairs on stuff. And apparently, as soon as the U.S. Air Force is confident enough with the Saudi Air Force in maintaining these aircraft, we're going to turn that base over to them, and then they're going to run it on their own.
How long's that base been in operation?
It's been there a while. I don't know a whole lot of the specifics about it, but what I did learn is that when you hear a lot of these foreign aid numbers, we hear a lot of money that gets spent in different countries from the U.S., and I think the media doesn't do a really good job of telling you what that aid is buying. I think a lot of people think it's just, we're dropping food on doorsteps, or we're spending money in countries. But in this case, Saudi Arabia has oil reserves and has a lot of money. So why is the U.S. sending money there, right? And really, what we're doing is providing education and training for them to be more self-sufficient with their technology. And that's where a lot of the foreign aid goes. That costs
money. Okay.
It costs money, exactly.
Yeah, so makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
And I learned something there at the base. It was funny because we were, kind of presented as almost being celebrities, because some of the people in our group were. So like AJ from Overhauling and Chip Foose, everybody knows them, and they're like, yeah, so AJ and Chip Foose are to be here, and some other automotive celebrities from the States. Well, a lot of the airmen, and there was Army soldiers there as well, they had no clue who we were. They don't follow that stuff. They might not be gearheads or whatever, but what they were is very happy to have visitors. Because
good.
A lot of times they don't have other American civilians that come and hang out with them. Sure. So they were really great to talk to, and we learned a lot. One gentleman was training Kelle about how the inner workings of the jet engines work on Black Hawk helicopters, complete with cutaway diagrams and all kinds of stuff.
Oh man, I bet she was into it.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
She has repeatedly said she missed the boat on her educational path because, if she had the opportunity to learn how to fix helicopters, she would have taken it.
Right on.
Yeah. But also, we learned, and this being a veteran, that it was spelled out for me anyway a little more clearly, that a lot of our soldiers have a career path in the service that is largely a meritocracy. If you're good at something, you might get advanced in rank to do more of it, or to run, things, as opposed to being in the private sector, where a lot of times you have to sell yourself and identify opportunities and train up for them and present your skill set and really pursue those. So we were talking with a couple airmen who will be getting out of the Air Force in the next near foreseeable future, and they felt they didn't have the skill set to sell themselves to an employer.
Because I hear that's a problem with people getting out of the military, is their skill set doesn't necessarily translate into anything worthwhile in the civilian sector, and that's a real problem.
Well, these particular gentlemen, their skill set is invaluable, I think, in the private sector. It's just getting them to approach an employer and present and sell that skill set. Because in many ways, this one gentleman was telling us, so he oversees, he was a maintenance advisor, and it's his job to keep 28 airplanes in the air and oversee the crews that keep 28 airplanes in the air. So he had 300 people working under him, and everything was, procedure, policy, strict management structure. I mean, this is what companies need, right? Private companies. But everything that he does is essentially an assignment straight out of a policy manual, or he is told what's expected of him, and then he has to go make that happen. And it's not going up to company X and analyzing what that company needs and saying, well, here's what I can do for you. He's more used to being kind of told what needs to be done from him. So we are now trying to figure out ways to help these ladies and gentlemen out with that skill set of being confident that the things that they've learned do translate, and presenting that information to a potential employer through an interview or casual conversation in a manner that pitches their services and helps them to, we just told them straight up, when you get out and you go to apply for a job, what as a company that hires people like we do, it's very important for somebody to come to us and say, well, here's your problem and here's what I can do to solve it. Bring that solution.
Right.
As opposed to just saying, well, what are your hours and how much am I going to make? And both these guys were like, oh, yeah, right. Well, the lights are starting to come on. And it's a bummer that they don't have that kind of job acquisition, career acquisition skill training.
Yeah, it is.
That all grew out of our visit to the airbase.
Well, that's cool, man. I hope... are you going to try to develop something to give back to those guys, or
we also met one of the PR officers there who I've been corresponding with about helping these people with this very topic. And I don't know if the way that I can help is purely through my own experiences, just like what I told you. When we interview somebody. But I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of online video resources available that we might be able to pull together a bunch of stuff and say, here, just check these out, as you start to transition into civilian life.
I got you.
We exchanged numbers and email addresses, and we extended all these guys, even though they had nothing to do with the automotive world, but we personally invited them to contact us if they want to do a mock interview or if they want to just chat about this stuff.
Right on, man.
We're more than happy to help because, we definitely feel a debt of gratitude to our people in the military who've been looking out for us and doing jobs like they've been doing, in different countries and whatnot. And it's a small scale thing. I don't have the resources to launch a global program, but if we can produce a few videos that get shared and maybe help them out, that's something that we're going to try and do.
That's what, a lot of these guys who get out of the military, you hit the nail on the head. They've come from an environment where they are told what to do and what's to the letter of what's expected out of them. And to make that transition to being a self-starter and taking initiative and seeing problems and solving them is difficult for a lot of people. It was hard for me. When I got out of the Air Force, I had a hard time finding a job. I had a really hard time. Thank God a friend of my uncle's worked at a place where he got me a job doing some, menial stuff, but, not a career by any stretch, but it was a job. I was living at home again after 4 years of being in the military. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do, man? I mean, I don't want to work at McDonald's, for crying out loud.
Right.
So I need something that's going to, appeal to my, electromechanical skill set that I possess. And luckily I found that, but it was really difficult. So to be able to help these guys it's a bigger deal than you realize for these guys. It's huge.
Well, I feel like they're shortchanged. And it's not by design. I think the military is there to train people to do tasks and then they move on. I don't think the military is really super concerned with providing a career beyond the military.
True.
They're there for what they're there for. So it's our responsibility in the civilian world to help these people because they have so much to offer. The management skills that this one gentleman was talking about, and another guy was an ammunitions advisor. So he was training, in this case, the Saudis on how to mount munitions to aircraft and take them down and service them and load them and identify them and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's mechanics. That
right.
skill set translates instantly if you present it the right way.
Exactly. and that's the problem. These young airmen getting out, they don't know how to present that,
right?
And employers don't necessarily know how to recognize that. So
right.
it's like two ships passing in the night,
right?
That have a lot that can really benefit each other, but they don't know each other's there. Really.
Totally. And in our case, we have Sergeant Jason Beebe, who was in the Air Force, who works for us at our shop,
right.
And he was right in that same boat too. I mean, he was an Air Force loadmaster and flying crews and equipment all around the world, and he got out and found himself working a parts counter at an auto parts store. Just because nobody asked the right questions of what he had to offer, and he didn't have the skill set and, quite frankly, the personality to. He's not going to stand on a soapbox and say he's great.
Right.
He's very humble and
take me, I'm valuable.
Right. Yeah, he and we met him at a job fair at Scott Air Force Base, and ended up Kelle recognized that. He was like hyper respectful, just yes sir, no sir, by the book, and we hired him in as a shop assistant, and now he basically runs, the operations of our whole organization. He handles shipping in and out, everything, is where things are organized and placed and processes and all this stuff, and for him it's second nature because that's what he did for 20 years.
Sure.
We have everything but the airplane, basically, from what he did, and we really,
nice.
We find ourselves asking, well, how are these people not being snapped up immediately after their service, and being placed in positions because they've got so many skills that are just missing from general society. So I think that connection is fractured between. As soon as they get out and getting a career start. So I think it's in the best interest of our country to help these people out. Couldn't
agree more.
Our self-serving interest of, maybe we find another gem to hire on our team. Who knows? But,
right on, man.
Yeah, so again, that's so now you know why my head is spinning right now because
you got a lot going on up there, man.
Yeah, and it was only a couple weeks after the SEMA show, and then our next episode we're going to hear your story of the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals and how our team had a big win with the car and you were able to pull off all of your tasks there. So that's a nice little teaser.
Stay tuned.
That's right. So the month of November was just enormous in every way possible. So it's no wonder why I'm a little bit run down and fighting a cold because I got a lot to process.
Amen, man. No doubt.
All right. We've teased them long enough. Let's get into our trivia questions.
All right. So, Kevin, I asked you, what was the most powerful factory stock engine that GM has produced? And you said the current LT5, pumping out about 730 horsepower. You actually corrected my own trivia question because I had the LT4 at 650, but totally not thinking about crate engines. But you're absolutely right. So LT5 is it.
Wow. I was expecting you to tell me it was like in the Terex Titan earth moving equipment. Something that made 10,000 foot-pounds.
I should have worded the question better and said the engine that was available in a factory production car. But it just escaped me to say that. But no, LT5 is more than correct. So congratulations, Kevin.
Hey, all right.
Hey.
That one I
you could be all run down and still get that question right.
Well, I got lucky. Okay, well, in my case, I asked you in 1973, and this probably does apply throughout all the 70s and probably into the 80s, what did 80% of all motorhomes have in common? And you said rear-wheel drive, which I'm going to say is probably right. I would think that it was probably more than 80% because I don't know how many of the GMC front drive motorhomes they made. I can't see it being more than 5% of the market. But the answer, so you win. That was right.
We don't know that, but
the answer I was going for was 80% of them had a Dodge chassis.
Get out of here! Really?
Yeah, Dodge owned the RV market. So Winnebago and the Dodge and Viking and all of those brands of motorhomes, 80% of them were built on Dodge chassis.
Well, I'll be darned. That is interesting, except for the few that were built on the GM chassis.
That's it. That's it. And now you know why they wanted to do that revolutionary front drive chassis, because they wanted a little piece of that action.
Yeah, I guess so. And I love that motorhome. I love that front drive motorhome.
Oh, yeah. They're cool.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah. All right, my man. Well, that was quite a show.
Yeah, it was. Great show. Great recap of the Global Auto Salon in Riyadh. I loved learning about your adventures out there and how it opened your eyes to what the culture is really shifting to, which is really positive. And I want to hear definitely more about that. And I can't wait to read more stories about it and see more videos being put out about that from other people as well as you. And I really think this is the start of something really huge that's going to happen in that region. So and you were there in the ground floor.
Well, and for the first time, I really feel like we can be part of something, because those changes, and I'm not just saying in Saudi, it could be anywhere, but they're not going to happen on their own. And so we've been communicating with people over there to help them with their own events, help them contact more U.S. companies. So I guess the takeaway from that whole experience is that I've reached a point in my world where I finally feel like I've got maybe something to offer, for those those people there and maybe our servicemen and whatever. It's time to give something back, and that's what we're going to try and do. So, amen,
brother.
Yeah, right on. All right, so you heard the preview. Tune in next time when we hear Mike say,
"Oh my God, that's a lot of work."
And you'll be able to hear that on the next episode of V8 Radio, found on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio. I don't have the list in front of me.
iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, and V8Radio.com.
That's right. And Facebook. Yes. And until then, I guess keep the shiny side up. I'm Kevin Oeste for Mr. Mike Q-Ball Clarke, and we will talk at you next time on V8 Radio.